Welcome to the Landscaping Podcast. My name is Joel Barnett and I'm your host. And today's episode is the 18th of the Instagram lives that we've done, where I'll get you guys to ask questions during the week and answer them in this podcast, which gets released on a Thursday and I record live on a Sunday. The first question is from Tom Lynch, and he said, Have you ever considered adding maintenance to the business? So it's something that I did do when I started back from the bank. So the second phase of Install Gardens 8 years ago. So it was kind of when I was restarting the business. So I was just taking on any work I could get at the time. But that's the only time that we've ever done maintenance. And we did it with the guys who do the construction. So it's not something that I recommend doing unless you've got dedicated maintenance people, because you need to be sort of focused on what you're good at, and there's different charge rates as well, so you can make more money doing one as opposed to the other. One takes longer, and it's just a better. I've never seen it work well with different like people doing different jobs. So you want to have people do construction doing that, and maintenance people doing maintenance. So it didn't last long, and it's not something I would ever consider adding again unless you have dedicated people for it. But again, I wouldn't do it because that's not anything I've got any experience in. So there's plenty of other people who can do it well. So I'm happier to recommend them to do the maintenance. Cascade Landscape said, what's one type of construction that you feel you've never nailed, like bricklaying or rendering, etc.? So it's probably just about everything within landscaping, I would say, because anything you find that we do within landscaping, whoever does that as their sole job is, or should be, better at it than what you are, because you can't be good at everything. So I would say everything is something that we haven't nailed. So there's always room for improvement on doing everything. There's some things that we don't do at all, like pool fencing. We don't do a lot of steel work. We'll do steel edging, like just garden edging, but not pergolas or anything like that. So there's plenty of stuff within landscaping that other landscapers might do that we don't do. But there's nothing that we wouldn't have a crack at anyway. No, we've never built a steel pergola, but we do a bit of steel welding. We've done a couple of gates. But again, it's nowhere near as good as what someone does who solely does that. So never really nail anything. Even with paving, that's something that most landscapers would do more. And there's not a lot of solely paving companies, but there are some companies who just do paving, and it's good seeing the work they do, because it's often better than what a lot of landscapers do. So you get a better result getting all the different trades if you had time to choose them all, but it's going to take a lot of time to pick them all, and end up costing more money. So it depends if it's worth it for you or not, chasing all of them up. Etch Landscapes said, within your design and construction process, do you produce construction drawings or details for your project? If so, do these come before or after the initial quote? How do you go about charging for this work? So with my designs, we don't do any construction details on it. When we're getting building permits, we'll provide the required drawings to get the building permit, which has got some elevations and some construction detail to show how we're going to do the particular item that we need the permit for. But we don't provide construction drawings, because that's not part of our skills. So you're better off doing what you can do well. And even though I know how things are going to get built, it's just having to draw it is a different skill set. And then it kind of opens you up to a bit more liability as well. If you're doing designs that other people are building and you're saying how it should be built, and then if there's something that goes wrong with that, then you're partially liable for it. So it's just not something that I would ever allow for. Probably a good question for a landscape architect, because they often have to provide their construction drawings. But it's not something that I do within my repertoire. But in terms of charging for it, you would just work out how much it's going to cost you, how long it's going to take to do, and then work it out from that way, and be upfront about it as well. Because I've seen some construction drawings that I've worked off them, and they're horrendous. Like they're not how I would do it. So I think I mentioned that it might be in the episode that's coming out this week, actually, that I would, if I was building off a set of plans and it's got details on how to build it, and I think it should be done differently, I'll do it the way I think it should be done, because I'm the one who's going to have to back up the work that's getting done anyway. So you're better off doing it that way, rather than building it the way a designer has specified for you to do it. Because if there's something that goes wrong with it, their client's not going to contact the designer saying there's something wrong with this construction method. So they'll probably contact you, and then you'll end up doing it the way you're going to do it anyway, potentially. Next question is from Cam from Abcam Horticulture. He's got a couple here. Should Dan Forearm legally change his name? It sounds like he might have already done that if he's being referred to as Dan Forearm. His other question was, how do you handle you guys having time off in terms of scheduling jobs around them? Do you require a formal submission, and how much notice do they need to give? And also, how do you cope with the sick leave? So I'm pretty good as an employer for my guys to have time off. So if they message me now saying they've got something on tomorrow, and they want to have a day off annual leave, that's fine with me. So I'm big on letting them have time off whenever they want it, because life is more important than work. So if they're sick, then they're sick. There's nothing you can do about it. There's no point worrying about it. I don't bother with getting medical certificates from doctors, because I could go and get a medical certificate from a doctor now, and I could say I need 2 days off work and I could get one. So, and even though I'm not sick at all, so they're pointless getting them. Some people do it just to make their employer have to go and do something as a bit of a deterrent, but there's no point. I think if I had a bigger company with more employees, it might be a different story, but because I've only got a couple and I trust them, so it's not really worth it. But yeah, my guys will sometimes give me a fair bit of notice about time off they're going to have, and then I'll forget that they told me anyway until the week it's happening. So I'm pretty flexible like that. And schedules go out the window for a million different reasons. So that's just another one of them. And I don't require a formal submission or anything like that. But again, it'd be a completely different story if you've got a bigger business. So if you're wanting to have a big business, then you're better off putting these processes in place while you're smaller. So then it just becomes natural, because you don't want to wait until you get 10 guys before you put these processes in place. You're better off doing it earlier. So a question come through from Curve Landscapes saying, thanks so much for a great podcast, Joel. What made you start the podcast? So the first episode would be a good one to listen to, because I talk about it in that. But basically, because I love listening to podcasts, and I wanted to hear a particular fella hear his story about how he started in the industry and all his story. So rather than recommending him to another podcast to interview, I decided I would do it myself. So that's what I did. And just coincidentally, it was 2 years ago today that I recorded the first episode up in Coolangatta in southern New South Wales. So it's been nearly 2 years since the first episode went out, which is pretty crazy to think about. And the episode this episode we're recording now will be episode 113. It's pretty wild. Next question from James Zala. Is it still shorts weather? It's good timing for that question, because on Monday last week I was still in shorts, and I walked out the garage and turned around, went back inside and got my pants on. So Monday and Tuesday I wore pants, and then shorts the rest of the week. Tomorrow will be shorts today because it's going to be 21. But last year was the first year I'd worn pants just about forever. So it was a big step, but I didn't regret it one bit. I'm getting older now, so I'm starting to moving around less and not getting as much heat. But I used to always wear shorts regardless of the weather and never had an issue with it. But now I enjoy the long pants, and they'll be coming back pretty soon. Still got another 2 and a bit weeks of autumn, but yeah, the legs will be getting covered. And Dan Foreman said, "Is Charlie going to win Dancing with the Stars?" So he's referring to Charlie Albone there, because he's in Dancing with the Stars. They got announced this week, and he's in winning form. So certainly in with a chance. I haven't seen what the odds are, but I'd definitely say he's I haven't seen him dance either. So couldn't say much about that, but yeah, that'd be good to see. Life of Bow River said, have you been directly inspired into action from any of your past interview guests? So I'm someone who knows everything, knows how to do everything, or knows not so much knows how to do everything, but I know what needs to be done, but I just need to make the stupid mistakes myself before I do what needed to be done, even though I knew it was the right thing to do, if that makes sense. So I'm slow to react on hearing things. So I have changed the way I do things based on talking to people on the podcast, but not as soon as what I should. So it's kind of hearing people say the same thing, or different people say the same thing and same messages to pass on. The way they do things and the mistakes they've made, I need to hear it a few times before I actually take action. And there's still things I need to improve on. I've never gone into the systems and procedures, like setting them up. Yeah, that's something that, yeah, I don't think I will do it. I don't know. Probably won't do. I definitely don't think I will do that still. But who knows? Because I never know how long the business is going to go for. When you, if you had told me 10 years ago, then I might have started doing it. But yeah, it's hard to forecast how long the business is going to be going for, and what things are worth, what systems and processes are worth putting in place. Again, it's one of those things. If you've got a big business or you're wanting to start a larger business, couldn't recommend more highly to set up systems and procedures, so now everyone knows how to do things. But it's not as important when you've only got two or three guys. Still good to do if you do it, but it's not something that I've done. But yeah, there's things like that I've heard a lot of people do. Just trying to think what other things that people have said that I've put into action. But yeah, nothing's coming to mind, but there definitely is things I think of that I've heard from the podcast that I've been doing. Sea Spray Landscape said, what's the worst work situation that has happened on site for you or your team? So when I was an employee for InStyle, we were getting rid of some agapanthus, just loading them up onto the truck with I think it was a Kanga loader, so like a Dingo or Vermeer, would have been like just a mini skid steer. And I took off to go and get something, and then came back. And one of our there was a girl who was loading it up for us with the machine. I got back, drove into the driveway, and the machine was tipped up on the end, so the bucket was down, and where you stand was up in the air. And she was on the ground next to the machine, but I think she just rolled her ankle. So because you know how like agapanthus are pretty heavy, so it was a bit too heavy for the machine. And I think anyone who's operated a machine long enough, like one of those mini skid steers, would know that they tip if you have too much weight in the bucket. So it had started to tip, so she jumped off and rolled her ankle. So nothing too serious. We've had a few issues with Rio, like when you haven't got caps on your Rio. Had a few gashes from that. There's one time I was doing some paving, and I was hitting the paver down with a rubber mallet, trying to move it across as I was hitting it down. So I was kind of hitting it on an angle, and my thumb got in the way, so I hit my thumbnail. So that was an enjoyable few weeks while that came off. But we've been pretty lucky not to have anything serious. And it's not because we do anything like all the OHS people say you should do, like having all these meetings and swims and all that kind of stuff. It's just because you do have common sense and do things that are the right thing to do. And don't be stupid. Look after other people, and don't sort of just say something's not your problem. Like there's nothing, so we don't do all that formal stuff, but and so then people might say it's just luck that we haven't had any issues, but yeah, we don't rush things either. So yeah, been pretty lucky to not have any serious issues, knock on wood. Has said, you spoke about your workers before. I must say that when they come into work, they're always great to deal with. I get it. So I've only got the two guys at the moment, but the amount of compliments I get about them is insane. Just about every single job, the clients will mention how hard they work and they are. And then Wazza works at the local hire yard, so he's talking about how that when they go to pick up machines. But that's what makes it hard to put new employees on, because those two have set a high standard that other people have to meet. So, haven't found anyone who can meet them yet. And Curve Landscape said, do you and your team perform all tasks on your jobs? Example, if you have a big core field block wall, would you ever get subbies in like a bricky or block layer to do it all? Well, with that, so we do get other people in. Like we did a job that was about $300,000, and I think $90,000 of it was the work that we were doing. So my quote was $300,000, and $90,000 was quote the work that we were directly doing, and the rest of it was subcontractors I was getting in to do certain elements. So absolutely get people in like that. But for your example of using a block layer, when we do block walls, we use the Versalock blocks. So they're the ones where you lay the bottom course and then you just stack the rest up on top of each other. So they're lightning quick to go up and really easy. And if they're getting clad in something, then it's easy to look after the straightness of it. Don't have to be too perfect because you're going to be laying on top of it. Definitely get people in. Like the steel work, like I mentioned before, we get the guys in to help do that. So Jay from Metal Art and Design, they do that work for us. Got pool fence guys we use for glass pool fencing. There's not a lot. I'm looking to get. I'd rather get other people to do the excavation works that we do. Definitely get other people to come in and do subcontracting work for us, and it's going to be doing it more as well, because I want to focus on doing the things that we do well, rather than doing everything. But then again, you're getting subcontractors in means you've got to rely on them, and I've had issues with a few jobs where they're extremely unreliable, so then it just turns into a nightmare. So yeah, it's a tricky one. There's pros and cons both ways. So the pros are obviously that you can get through the jobs quicker, you can focus on what you do well, to potentially be more profitable. But the cons are definitely having to rely on other people, and they can throw your schedule out. And we've got issues with a steel pool fencer that is not who I use normally, who's just been a nightmare to deal with. That's just delaying the job endlessly. So it's a tricky one. Every now and then I think, I should use more subcontractors, and then you start using them and you think, that's why I don't use subcontractors. So when you find good ones, you've got to stick with them and really look after them, because you might have to find a new one, and it's very hard to find good ones. Heidi I1 said, how do designers deal with starting out and their self-doubts of their design? It's probably, I reckon, listening to a lot of the designers in this podcast would be a good way to get a good answer to that. Obviously, going to take a lot longer than what my 2-minute answer would be, but you'll hear that most designers sort of start out like that, like they're not too sure what people are going to think of their designs. I know when I submit a design to someone, I'm nervous about what they're going to say about it, because you put a lot of your heart and soul into it, and then they might hate it. Hopefully you've spoken to them enough to find out their brief before that, but you've just got to put yourself out there and not get too upset if someone doesn't like it, because not everyone likes everything. And sometimes there's miscommunication, so you don't understand the brief like they've explained it. And that could be the fault of you or the client, and it doesn't matter. It's just, things like that happen. But just know that everyone has self-doubts, whether they say it or not. So there'll be designs that the client thinks is the best things in the world, and then there'll be ones that the client thinks you didn't listen to them at all. So just don't get too high or too low on your feelings about when you do a design. Just sort of be in the middle somewhere. So then, you can't go wrong really doing that. But if you listen to some of the best designers, they've been in the same boat. And also just trust, if you've done training or if you've got experience, just trust your knowledge and your experience that you've done. And she also said, how do you learn to picture what you can see in a drawing? So if that's in regards to as we're building it, that just comes from experience, and some people can do that and some can't. So That's why 3D images are pretty good, or 3D renderings, because some people can't picture a 2D design, what it's going to look like. So it can help doing the 3D design. Other than that, it's just experience on knowing how things are going to look. But even landscapers who are very experienced still don't know what something's going to look like from a 2D design in real life once it's built. So I don't know of any learnings or training that you can do to help you be able to see that. I think the only way you can do it is by getting designs converted to 3D, which would help. But spending a lot of time with the design in the space that it's going would help. So then you can visualize what things are going to look like against buildings and how it's all going to look that way. You can work out what heights things are going to be. And it's when you're standing there looking at the site it's going into, that could help. But it can also make it more difficult. Like if there's a lot of trees are going to be coming out, a lot of excavation is going to be done before paving goes in or something like that. So it can be a bit tricky when there's a lot of other things in the way, especially when there's height changes or there's a big slope on the land. So yeah, it's not an easy one, very tricky, but and don't be too disheartened if you can't visualize things, because there's plenty of people who can't. Two Cubs Camping has said, what percentage of the budget or quote is just for plants on a new project? So I'd never put any thought into this about any elements within a quote about what percentage they make up of the total project. So I looked at 3 quotes, just three recent ones that were done, or 3 random ones. And it was interesting seeing how vastly different they are. So there was one where there was a $250,000 project and the plants made up 6.8%. And this is for supply and install of plants. And there was a $300,000 project where it was 15%. And there was a $156,000 project where it was 30%. That was pretty crazy, that one. So it was 156 grand, and there was, I think, 48 grand for plants. I couldn't remember what plants there were in that one, but yeah, that just shows how extreme it is. So that one was four times the amount, 4 times the percentage of one of the other projects. So there's obviously no average on what the percentage of the plants should be. If I had to pick a figure, I would have thought it would be around the 10 to 15%. So if you're doing $100,000 project, you put 10,000 or 15,000 into plants. But it just makes such a massive difference on what else is included. Like that $250,000 project, there's a lot. I think it might be $100,000 of that just goes into paving and retaining walls. So if there's a lot of retaining walls compared to a project that's got none, that's obviously going to make a big difference in how much percentage goes. So it's not something you'd want to look at. Just like working out things by square meterage rates, it's not something you want to do because it's not reliable. You could look back at it and just out of curiosity to see how much it works out to be, but I wouldn't quote or make any allowances based on any percentages. Yeah, they were just 3. I didn't go through any other quotes. It was just those 3. And it was 6.8%, 15%, and 30%. So pretty broad range there. Greg from Outside Space said, will you be doing in-person interviews again, even in the coldest weather possible? So again, good timing of that, because it was 2 years ago. I think it was 2 days. It'll be 2 years ago where I interviewed Greg as part of the first group of podcast guests. And I was doing the interviews outside, and it was freezing cold when I was interviewing him, and my mouth was struggling to move. It was that cold, and Greg was sitting there shivering as well. So it was I think it was a short episode, that one, because it was so cold that we wanted to wrap it up. But I won't be doing any interviews in person again, even though they're so much better to do. It's so much more enjoyable. The conversation goes a lot better. But because I've been doing so many on Zoom now, I find like when I first changed over to Zoom, I found it a bit of a challenge to have the conversation going, but now I'm used to it. So it's probably no different to doing it in person for me. Might be different for the guest, but even if I was doing my next door neighbor, I would still do it on Zoom, because it records it well. The audio is good. And when I was setting up the audio for the in-person ones, I'd have a mixer board. I'd have to change the volume of it, and it would be different every time. And was a couple of times I had to use the backup mic because the audio was no good. So there's just too many things that can go wrong doing it in person. So I'd rather do it on Zoom and it gets recorded and it's consistent that way as well. They're all the same now. So yeah, no more in person, especially not now that it's cold. And the last question is from Creative Living Projects. And he said, I often wonder if I'm getting the most out of my accountant, so would love to hear from yours. And on Clint's podcast, so that's Clint from The Full Landscape, you said you were going back to $20,000 or $30,000 projects. Have you done that? And if no, why not? That's a good question, because someone just this week, I reckon it was, someone asked, someone said they listened to that episode as well. So I went back and listened to it. And I did, yeah. There was two things I took out of it. So one of them was that, like Creative Living Projects has said, that I was wanting to do the $20,000 to $30,000 projects because I felt you could make more money and turn them over quicker than the big ones. But the reason I'm not doing those is because we're doing a lot more designs now, and the fee that I charge for our designs, no one who's getting a $20,000 or $30,000 design is paying that. So we're still doing big projects because the people who are paying our design fee are spending a lot on the actual landscaping as well. But every now and then one will come across, like if there's just a small part, like a small bench seat, or we'll do a bit of concreting, like a bit of barbecue benches and that sort of thing. So we'll be doing some small stuff. So when they come along, I will quote them and we'll squeeze them in to the schedule. So I am looking to do them. So we are doing some small ones, but not as much as I would like. But that's because I keep working on the design side of things and keep those projects coming through. So it's a bit of a tricky one. But the other thing I took from that chat with Clint was, so the chat was a year and 3 months ago. So it was early March last year. It was just before the garden show then. And I was talking, I can't remember what the question was, but I basically said what I want to do going forward is make more profit, because I have been struggling to make money on jobs, so I want to make more money. And then I went and did the garden show this year, even though I was struggling financially last year. So definitely shouldn't have done that, because that hasn't helped it at all. But hopefully in 12 months' time, I won't listen back to this episode saying I shouldn't have done it again, because that is the focus at the moment, is to be profitable for the next few years. So hopefully that will happen. Josh Herold said, with inflation and customers holding on funds, what are you finding are common projects requested? Our projects are still pretty normal. Like there hasn't been a change, and that's because when you're working on the crazy amounts of dollars that people are spending on their projects like we are, that people aren't as affected as much by the interest rate rises and any changes to the economy. Then they still go and get things done. So we found that same through COVID, which was fortunate for us. People still spending money. So I think when you're on the projects that are those $20,000 or $30,000 ones, that's when it's a lot more difficult for people to spend money. But the larger ones, people are still spending it. So we haven't had any issues with that. I reckon there'd probably be things like garden lighting that would get taken out. Like there's certain things that are nice to haves, but not every project needs it. I think it's good for every project to have it, but if it's a question of whether you're going to have garden lighting or not get the project done at all, you're obviously going to drop the garden lighting so you can get the rest of the project done. So there's certain things that you can take out of a project and get smaller plants as well. But yeah, luckily we're in the end of the market where people aren't too bothered by it. So pretty lucky to be there. But that is the last question. So the episode out this week is with Carla Ramsland from Art House, a landscape architect in WA. And yeah, she was awesome to talk to. I could have spoken for hours. So really good chat with her. And we've got another stonemason coming up, I'm interviewing this week. And there is also another one who I can't remember. So But there's 2 I'm recording this week, and then I'll be sending out more messages this week to try and get some more people on. But yeah, I'll do the questions again during the week. So thank you very much once again to everyone who asked one of these questions. Had quite a few this week, which is great, and a couple of doubles. And I had a couple of messages during the week before I asked again. So thank you for everyone who's done that. And we'll see you next week.